Hello, everybody. I hope you are having a wonderful day so far. I am so excited because it is finally September, which means that it is the start of my favorite time of year, which is the fall to winter seasons. I absolutely love everything about fall. I love the cooler weather. I love the layers that you get to wear. I love the flavors of this time of year, and I especially love books that remind me of autumn. So, in continuing with my book recommendations for each of the seasons, today I'm going to give you 10 recommendations that you can read to give you that autumn feeling. These books are going to range from some classics to some more modern stories, but I think there's a good variety here that anybody could find something that they enjoy reading to just inspire them in this time of the year. So, my first recommendation is The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is a story that I have loved for a long time. I've been a longtime fan of the Sherlock Holmes stories, and this particular one is one of my favorites. It takes place in October, and it's very mysterious, and you have all like the mystically kind of elements of the story in addition to the moors and the fog of the moors, and it's just very much a cozy kind of vibe, not necessarily in the storyline, but the way that it makes you feel. You just want to curl up with a blanket, a nice cup of tea, and read the story. There's been some wonderful adaptations in various ways over the years, from books to graphic novels to audiobooks to even some movie and TV adaptations. So, however you enjoy to consume your reading content, I definitely recommend that you read The Hound of the Baskervilles. My second book recommendation is also my favorite book of all time, and that is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I love this book, and honestly, I love reading it any time of the year, but I feel like it really fits well into fall for a couple of different reasons. There are some big parts of the book that take place in fall, specifically where you have the play that's going on, where Scout's dressed like a ham, very iconic of the story, but also the perspective of this transition from childhood innocence to just a more rooted in reality view of the world because of how some of the people in the book react and how some of the people in the book are treated. You have this childhood innocence that transitions into more of an adult or mature perspective of the world. And I always think of autumn as being a very transitionary time period because you're moving from the fun, energetic summer vibes to more of the reflective and more serious, I guess, kind of colder months of the year. I always find that the colder it gets, the more I'm like reflective on things that I've done and just things that I've seen. And you just become more introspective, I think is the word I was looking for. And so this book definitely leads to some introspection and also just like it's a beautiful book. It's so well written. Any time of the year, it's great, but I think especially in the autumn, it's a wonderful one to read. My next book recommendation is another one of my favorites, and it is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love this book as well. It really is just such a fun genre shift. I think if you're used to reading a lot of fiction or a certain kind of genre and you want something very different, the format of this book, the interview style of it, definitely gives you that. The main reason I picked this book for autumn is because it gives me Fleetwood Mac vibes, which, if you know the story behind the inspiration for this story, that makes sense. But I always think of Fleetwood Mac when I think of autumn, specifically Silver Springs by Fleetwood Mac. And if you know, you know, that relates to this. And so I just had to pick it as an autumn read because I think it's just a really fun story. Again, one you could read anytime, but I think is really fun when you get to read it in autumn. My next recommendation is part of a series that I think you could say the whole series would be good as an autumnal read, and that is the Practical Magic series. But I specifically have picked this one right here, The Rules of Magic by Alice Hoffman. This is the prequel to the Practical Magic original book. It's the first prequel that Alice Hoffman wrote, and it is about the ants and their brother and how they kind of come into where they live in the house that Practical Magic takes place in, and kind of their younger years leading up to where they actually are. And this book starts in the like fall season, so it made sense for me to include it here. But honestly, any of the Practical Magic books is a wonderful, cozy read for autumn. I love them. I think they're so well written, and so I definitely would recommend this one. My next book recommendation is again one of my favorite books of all time. It is Wayward by Amelia Hart. Now, this was the first Amelia Hart book I read because it was the first book that she ever published, and I was blown away by how well crafted this story is. It has some heavier kind of themes in it. So if that's something you kind of stay away from, that's just kind of a disclaimer. No spoilers or anything, but there are some heavier themes in this. But it is so beautifully written and it is such a cozy story, even with the heavier themes, that I had to include it in this. I think about this book at least once a week. I kid you not. It is so good. It is top 5 favorite books of all time for me. And I feel like the artwork feels very autumnal in like the just design of it. So I definitely recommend this one. If you have not read it, this one you should most certainly give it a try. Moving on, we have a kind of shift from what we were just discussing with Wayward to more of a young reader kind of focused story, and that is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. This is actually the graphic novel version of it. It is a wonderful story. I picked it because the date that the kind of story is centered around is September 3rd, I think 1940. And I'm not going to give huge spoilers away, but that date is really important in this book. And since September is a fall month, even though that date is not technically in fall, I had to include it in this because it also gives that kind of more, I guess, moody kind of vibe to it, mystical, fantastical. Those are the elements that I tend to think of when I think of fall, is that like wonder and whimsy that comes with it. And so this book definitely does that. But the pictures in it are beautiful. The story is fascinating. I read this graphic novel literally in a day, and I've seen the movie and I've read the original book as well, but it's so well crafted, and I definitely recommend this one. The next recommendation I have is The Thief Lord by Cornelia Funke. I think I said her name right. I picked this. Again, it's one of my favorite ones, but it's picked because the first 3 words of the book are "It was autumn." You can't get any better than that. But if you love a magical realism story and you've not read this, it is meant for young readers, but I think it is something that is still really enjoyable as an adult. And it takes place in Venice, Italy. There's a group of kids who stumble onto this fantastical place. That's all I'm going to say. If you want to know more, you should definitely check this one out. My next recommendation is actually a recent read for me, and that is Piranesi by Susanna Clark. Now, I think you could argue that this could be a book that could be read in either autumn or winter. The book itself doesn't really have seasons as we know it that it takes place in. And if you've read this book, you know what I mean. But just the mysteriousness of it, the kind of transient nature of the book, it felt very appropriate to recommend as an autumnal read. I definitely think a winter read would also be great for this. The format is more of like journal entries, which I found very fascinating. And the more I read it, the more confused and drawn into the story I was. And then by the end, it had a very satisfying ending. So I definitely recommend this one. This next book recommendation is a cozy fantasy that I absolutely love. And I'm going to try to say the name correctly. So I'm going to read it off of the book. The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. Now, I love this book so much. And I almost recommended it as a summer read simply because the artwork feels very summery to me. But then I remembered this book takes place in autumn. So I was like, I'm going to save it for an autumnal read. And who doesn't like a cozy fantasy in the autumn? It's beautifully written. I loved it so much. I have another book by this author that just recently came out that is on my TBR. I haven't got to it yet, but I know if it's anything like this, I'm going to enjoy it. But if you have not read this book yet, this is the perfect time of year to read it, so you should give it a go. And my last recommendation for autumnal books is this one right here. It is The Physic Book of Deliverance Dane by Catherine Howe. This was a book that I did not know if I was going to like when I originally got it. I got it at a used bookstore because I saw that the cover said the word spooky. And I, if you know me, am not normally somebody that likes spooky, scary books. But I thought, you know what? I'll give it a go. I'll give it a try. I'll get it. Who knows if I'll actually read it? And then I had a prompt for a reading challenge I was doing a couple years ago where I had to read a spooky book. And I was like, well, it said spooky on the cover. I'm going to give it a go. Honestly, it was so good. I loved it so much. And I didn't really think it was super spooky. There was one part that was definitely spooky, but not to the point where I felt like I couldn't read it because I was getting too spooked. Because I do get that way sometimes with scary stuff. But if you like dark academia, this is definitely a book that I recommend. It takes place in Massachusetts, and there's like a time hoppy kind of aspect between Salem, Massachusetts in the 1600s, and also the kind of modern day that the book takes place in. And it's just fantastical. It is more eerily fantastical than whimsical fantastical, if you know what I mean. But it's magical. It is wonderfully written, and I definitely recommend this one as well. So there you go. Those are my top 10 book recommendations for autumn. If you have any books that you like to read in this time of year or that remind you of this time of year that I did not mention, please let me know in the comments below. I always love getting new book recommendations, especially since we have the beginning of the autumn season here and we have the whole time to get to explore some new books. So if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with a friend who is looking for some autumnal reads as well. Until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day. Happy reading, and I will see you later. Bye.